October 15, 2024. Jonathan Pierce, CEO of a billion-dollar tech empire, was rushing to the most important board meeting of his career when he saw her. A young black girl struggling with a broken wheelchair in the pouring rain, tears streaming down her face as strangers walked past without a glance. He had 60 seconds to make his meeting, but something in her eyes stopped him cold, and in that split second, he made a choice that would cost him everything he'd built. Yet 6 months later, that same little girl would be the only reason he was still breathing. But how could a child in a wheelchair possibly save the life of a man who seemed to have it all? The rain hammered against the Chicago streets with relentless force, turning Madison Avenue into a river of gray. Jonathan Pierce checked his Rolex for the third time in as many minutes. 8:47 a.m. 13 minutes until the board meeting that would determine whether he kept control of Apex Innovations, the company he'd built from nothing over 15 brutal years. His driver had called in sick. Traffic was a nightmare. And now he was running through downtown in a $2,000 suit. His leather briefcase held over his head like a useless shield against the downpour. That's when he heard it. A sound that cut through the rain, through the honking horns, through the thunder rumbling overhead. A child's sob, raw and desperate. Jonathan slowed his pace, his eyes scanning the crowded sidewalk. Businesspeople rushed past, umbrellas colliding, everyone focused on their own destination. No one seemed to notice the small figure huddled against the brick wall of a closed coffee shop. She couldn't have been more than 9 years old. Her wheelchair sat at an awkward angle, one wheel completely detached and lying in a puddle beside her. Her pink raincoat was soaked through, her braids plastered against her small face. She clutched a backpack to her chest, shaking. Whether from cold or fear, Jonathan couldn't tell. He stopped walking. Every instinct screamed at him to keep moving. The board was waiting. Marcus Chen, his rival, was probably already in that conference room, ready to paint Jonathan as unreliable, unfocused, unworthy of leading the company he'd created. One more mistake, one more absence, and they'd vote him out. But the girl looked up then, her eyes meeting him through the rain. Brown eyes, wide with a mixture of hope and exhaustion. In that fraction of a second, Jonathan saw something he recognized, the kind of desperation that comes from being invisible in a world that's supposed to care. He made his choice. Jonathan crossed the sidewalk and knelt beside her, rain immediately soaking through his pants. "Hey there," he said gently, setting his briefcase down. "Looks like you could use some help." The girl's lip trembled. "My will broke. Mama's at work and I was trying to get to school, but it just came off and nobody will stop and..." Her words tumbled out in a rush before dissolving into fresh tears. "It's okay," Jonathan said firmly. "I'm here now. What's your name?" "Zara," she whispered. "Zara Williams." "Well, Zara Williams, I'm Jonathan. And I happen to be pretty good at fixing things." He wasn't, but he'd figure it out. He examined the wheel, the bolt had sheared clean off. This wasn't a quick fix. His phone buzzed in his pocket. 8:52. 8 minutes. Zara watched him, her small hands gripping her backpack tighter. "You don't have to stay. Everyone else left." Something in her voice, resigned, already accustomed to disappointment, made Jonathan's chest tighten. He pulled out his phone and did something he'd never done before. He texted his assistant. "Tell the board I won't make it. Emergency. Reschedule." Then he smiled at Zara. "I'm not everyone else. Now, let's get you and this wheelchair somewhere dry, and we'll fix this properly." For the first time, Zara's face brightened just a little. "You promise?" Jonathan looked at this child who'd been abandoned by a rushing world, and he made a promise he didn't yet understand would change everything. "I promise." Jonathan pushed Zara's broken wheelchair into the lobby of a hardware store 3 blocks away, the girl balancing carefully in his arms. The store clerk's eyes widened at the sight. A drenched executive in an expensive suit carrying a child. But Jonathan didn't care about appearances anymore. He set Zara down gently on a display bench and turned his attention to the wheelchair. The bolt hadn't just broken. It had corroded through. This chair had been repaired before multiple times by the looks of it. Cheap fixes that barely held. "How long has your wheelchair been breaking like this?" Jonathan asked, selecting tools from the aisle. Zara's voice was small. A lot. Mama tries to fix it, but we can't afford a new one. Insurance said no 3 times already. Jonathan's hands stilled. 3 times. He thought of the leather interior in his office, the imported espresso machine, and the original artwork on his walls. Things he'd barely noticed anymore. Where's your dad? The question came out before he could stop it. Gone, Zara said simply, with no emotion in her voice. She'd learned not to expect him. Mama works 2 jobs. She cleans offices at night and works at the hospital during the day. She's probably worried right now because I'm late. Jonathan pulled out his phone. What's her number? I'll call her. 20 minutes later, after a frantic conversation with Zara's mother, Diane Williams, a woman whose exhaustion Jonathan could hear through the phone, he'd made a temporary repair. It wouldn't last long, but it would get Zara to school. As he tightened the final bolt, his phone rang. His assistant's name flashed on the screen. He declined it. It rang again immediately. This time he answered. Mr. Pierce, the board is furious. Marcus Chun presented without you. He's calling for an emergency vote of no confidence. They're saying you're becoming unreliable, that this is the 3rd major meeting you've. I know what they're saying, Patricia. Jonathan's voice was calm, though his jaw tightened. Tell them I'll address it tomorrow. Tomorrow might be too late, sir. Mr. Chan is. Tomorrow, Patricia. He ended the call. Zara watched him with those 2 knowing eyes. Did I make you miss something important? Jonathan looked at her, really looked, at the worn fabric of her clothes, at the medical bracelet on her thin wrist, at the way she held herself with a dignity that didn't match her age. And suddenly he saw himself, not as he was now, but as he'd been at 9 years old, living in a trailer park in Detroit, wearing donated clothes, invisible to people who mattered. He'd clawed his way out of that life, built an empire, surrounded himself with marble and glass and steel. And somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten what it felt like to be the kid everyone walked past. You know what, Zara? Jonathan said quietly, kneeling so they were eye level. You didn't make me miss anything. You reminded me of something I'd forgotten. What's that? That some things matter more than board meetings. Zara tilted her head, studying him. Are you in trouble because of me? Jonathan smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Maybe. But it's worth it. He didn't know yet how true those words would become. Or that in 6 months, when his own life hung by a thread, this moment, this choice, would be the only thing standing between him and oblivion. For now, he simply lifted Zara back into her wheelchair, made sure the repair would hold, and walked her to school through the thinning rain. And when she waved goodbye at the school entrance, her smile finally breaking through, Jonathan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Jonathan didn't plan to go back. He told himself the wheelchair repair was a one-time thing, a moment of compassion in an otherwise ruthless schedule. But 3 days later, he found himself parked outside Lincoln Elementary School at 3:15 p.m., watching the flood of children pour through the double doors. Zara emerged last, her teacher wheeling her down the accessibility ramp. Even from a distance, Jonathan could see the wheel wobbling dangerously. His temporary fix was already failing. He got out of his car. Zara's face lit up when she saw him. Mr. Jonathan, you came back. Her teacher, a middle-aged black woman with kind eyes and a skeptical expression, stepped protectively closer. Zara, do you know this man? He fixed my wheelchair when it broke. In the rain. He carried me and everything. The teacher's expression softened slightly but remained cautious. Jonathan extended his hand. Jonathan Pierce. I helped Zara earlier this week. I wanted to check on her wheel. It was only a temporary repair. Mrs. Patterson, the teacher replied, shaking his hand carefully. Zara's told everyone about the nice man who missed his important meeting for her. Jonathan felt heat creep up his neck. It wasn't that important. Mrs. Patterson's eyebrow arched. Zara also said you were wearing a suit that cost more than her mama's monthly rent. Everything's important to somebody, Mr. Pierce. Before he could respond, Zara interjected. Can you fix it again? It's making this weird noise. Jonathan knelt beside the wheelchair, examining the bolt. It had loosened significantly. This needs a proper replacement part. The hardware store fix won't last. He looked up at Zara. Where does your mom work? I'd like to talk to her about getting you a better wheelchair. Zara's expression dimmed. She already said we can't afford it. And she doesn't like charity. It's not charity, Jonathan said firmly. It's making sure you get to school safely. Mrs. Patterson crossed her arms. Mr. Pierce, Diane Williams is one of the proudest women I know. She works herself to the bone for this child. If you come in and throw money around, you'll only hurt her pride. Jonathan sat back on his heels, chastened. In his world, problems were solved with checkbooks and contracts. But this wasn't his world. Then what do you suggest? He asked quietly. Mrs. Patterson studied him for a long moment. You want to help? Really help? Then show up. Not with your wallet. With your time. That's how Jonathan found himself, 2 days later, standing outside a modest apartment building on the south side, holding a bag of groceries and feeling more nervous than he'd been before any board presentation. Diane Williams answered the door in scrubs, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, exhaustion etched into every line of her face. She was younger than he'd expected, mid-30s maybe, but carried herself with the weariness of someone much older. Mr. Pierce. Her voice was neutral, guarded. Zara said you might stop by. I hope that's okay. I brought dinner. I thought. He faltered under her steady gaze. I thought maybe I could take a look at Zara's wheelchair properly. With your permission. Diane didn't move from the doorway. Why? The question was direct, challenging. Jonathan appreciated it. Because 25 years ago, I was a kid in Detroit wearing shoes held together with duct tape. And people walked past me every single day like I was invisible. He met her eyes. Your daughter looked at me like I mattered. Like stopping for her was the most natural thing in the world. I want to return the favor. Something shifted in Diane's expression. She stepped aside. You can come in. But I'm not a charity case, Mr. Pierce. Jonathan. And I know you're not. The apartment was small but immaculate. Every surface was clean, every item in its place. A couch that had seen better days faced a TV that still had a VCR attached. But the walls were covered with Zara's artwork, bright, colorful drawings that brought life to the modest space. Zara sat at the kitchen table doing homework, and when she saw Jonathan, she squealed. Mama, it's Mr. Jonathan. I told you he was real. I see that, baby. Diane's voice was softer now. Why don't you show Mr. Jonathan your science project while I start dinner? I brought dinner, Jonathan said quickly. Nothing fancy, just chicken, vegetables, rice. I wasn't sure what Zara liked. I like everything, Zara announced. Except Brussels sprouts. Those are gross. Jonathan laughed. A real laugh that surprised him. Agreed. No Brussels sprouts. As Diane unpacked the groceries, Jonathan examined Zara's wheelchair thoroughly. The frame was older, probably third or fourth hand. The wheels were mismatched. The seat cushion was worn through in places. This wasn't just a broken bolt. This was a wheelchair that had been failing for months, maybe years. How long have you had this? He asked Zara. Since I was 6. Mama got it from a church donation. 3 years. A growing child in a wheelchair meant for someone smaller. No wonder it kept breaking. Jonathan pulled out his phone and started making notes. Measurements, model information, weight capacity. Diane watched him from the kitchen, her expression unreadable. Dinner's ready, she announced. They ate at the small kitchen table, Zara chattering about her day while Diane remained mostly quiet, observing. Jonathan found himself relaxing in a way he never did at business dinners. There was no performance here, no strategic positioning. Just a simple meal with genuine people. Mr. Jonathan, Zara said suddenly. Why don't you have a family? Don't you get lonely in your big office? Zara. Diane's voice was sharp. That's rude. No, it's okay. Jonathan set down his fork. The question had struck something deep. I do get lonely. I spent so much time building my company that I forgot to build anything else. Zara tilted her head, considering. That's sad. Yeah, Jonathan agreed quietly. It really is. After dinner, as Jonathan prepared to leave, Diane walked him to the door. Thank you for dinner, and for caring about Zara. I'd like to come back, Jonathan said. If that's okay. Not to fix things or throw money around. Just to be here. Diane studied him carefully. Why? We're not your responsibility. No, Jonathan agreed. But maybe that's exactly why I need to be here. Diane was silent for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. Saturday mornings. Zara likes pancakes. As Jonathan walked to his car, Zara's voice called from the window. Bye, Mr. Jonathan. See you Saturday. He waved back, and for the first time in years, he had somewhere to be that had nothing to do with profit margins or board meetings. He had a place where he belonged. The photograph appeared on the Business News website 3 weeks later. Jonathan saw it during a Saturday morning at Zara's apartment, his phone buzzing insistently as he helped her with math homework. The headline made his stomach drop. Apex CEO's secret life. Slumming or scheming? The photo was grainy but unmistakable. Jonathan pushing Zara's wheelchair outside her school, both of them laughing. Someone had captured it, sold it, and now the internet was ablaze with speculation. What's wrong? Diane emerged from the kitchen, dish towel in hand. One look at Jonathan's face told her everything. What happened? He turned the phone toward her. Diane's expression hardened as she read, her jaw tightening with each word. Pierce's publicity stunt, she read aloud, her voice bitter. Billionaire CEO spotted with disabled child. Damage control after controversial board meeting? Sources say Pierce is facing a vote of no confidence. She shoved the phone back at him. Is that what this is? Damage control? No. Jonathan stood abruptly. Diane, I swear to you. Then what is it? Her voice rose. Because now my daughter's face is on the internet. Now people know where we live. Now we're part of whatever corporate game you're playing. Zara wheeled closer, her eyes wide with confusion. Mama? What's going on? Diane knelt beside her daughter, her voice softening. Nothing, baby. Go to your room for a minute. Okay? But Mr. Jonathan. Now, Zara. After Zara reluctantly left, Diane turned back to Jonathan, arms crossed. I need you to leave. Diane, please. I said leave. I should have known better. Men like you don't just show up in neighborhoods like this without an agenda. The words cut deeper than any boardroom betrayal. Jonathan felt something crack inside his chest. You're wrong about me. Am I? Diane's eyes glistened. My daughter is not a photo opportunity. She's not a tax write-off. She's not your redemption story. I know that. Jonathan's voice broke. I came here because for the first time in 20 years, I felt like I mattered for something other than money. Because your daughter looked at me like I was human, not a stock ticker. Because this place, he gestured around the modest apartment, feels more like home than anywhere I've lived. Diane's expression flickered, but she held firm. And now photographers know where my child goes to school. The weight of that statement settled over Jonathan like a physical blow. She was right. His presence had brought danger. His phone buzzed again, then again. Text messages flooded in from his assistant, from board members, from his lawyer. But one message made his blood run cold. It was from Marcus Chen. Nice try, Pierce. Using a disabled kid to save your career? That's low even for you. The board vote moved to Monday. Hope your publicity stunt was worth it. Jonathan closed his eyes. The board vote was accelerated. Marcus was using this against him, twisting it into something ugly. And Jonathan had no defense that wouldn't drag Diane and Zara deeper into the spotlight. I'll fix this, he said quietly. You can't fix this, Diane replied. You being here puts a target on us. People are going to think we're using you for money, or that you're using us for sympathy. Either way, Zara gets hurt. Then tell me what to do. Jonathan's voice was desperate now. Tell me how to make this right. Before Diane could answer, a knock rattled the apartment door. She tensed, moving protectively toward Zara's room. Jonathan opened it to find a woman with a microphone and a camera crew behind her. Mr. Pierce, Jessica Romano, Channel 7 News. Can you comment on your relationship with the Williams family? Is this connected to the board's vote of no confidence? Are you using this child? Jonathan stepped into the hallway, pulling the door shut behind him. His voice dropped to a dangerous calm. You have 5 seconds to leave this building before I call every lawyer I have and bury your station in lawsuits. We have a right to. 4 seconds. The reporter hesitated, then signaled her crew. This isn't over, Mr. Pierce. As they retreated, Jonathan leaned against the door, his heart pounding. Inside, he could hear Diane's voice comforting Zara, who was crying now. He'd brought this, his presence, his world, his problems. He dragged them into this family's life and contaminated everything pure about it. His phone rang. His lawyer. Jonathan, we need to discuss damage control. The board is demanding a statement. Marcus is painting this as a desperate publicity grab. If you don't distance yourself from this situation immediately. No. Excuse me? I said no. I'm not releasing a statement. I'm not distancing myself from anything. Then you'll lose the company. They'll vote you out Monday morning. Jonathan stared at the closed door, hearing Zara's muffled sobs through the wood. Then I lose the company. He ended the call. When he knocked softly, Diane opened the door. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. You should go. I know. Jonathan swallowed hard. But I need you to know something. I'm not walking away because they're telling me to. I'm stepping back because you and Zara deserve peace. But I'm not disappearing. When this dies down, when the cameras leave, I'm coming back. If you'll let me. Diane's expression softened slightly. Why would you risk everything for us? Because everything I've built means nothing if I can't protect the people who actually matter. He pulled an envelope from his pocket. This isn't charity. It's not a publicity stunt. I ordered a new wheelchair for Zara 3 weeks ago, before any of this happened. It's being delivered Tuesday. The medical supply company has all the details. Diane took the envelope, her hands trembling. Jonathan, you don't have to thank me. You don't have to forgive me for bringing this chaos. Just let her have the wheelchair. Please. Before Diane could respond, Zara's voice called from her room. Mr. Jonathan? Are you leaving because of me? Jonathan's throat tightened. He looked at Diane, who nodded reluctantly. He entered Zara's room, kneeling beside her bed. She clutched her stuffed elephant, tears streaming down her face. Those people said mean things about you, Zara whispered. They said you were using me. But you're not, right? You're my friend. Jonathan took her small hand. I am your friend. Always. But sometimes friends need to step back so they don't accidentally hurt each other. The cameras, the reporters, that's my world, and it's not fair to bring it into yours. But you'll come back? He kissed her forehead. The moment I can. I promise. As Jonathan left the building, 3 more news vans had arrived. Cameras flashed. Questions were shouted. He ignored all of them, climbing into his car with a single thought burning in his mind. He'd found something real, something worth fighting for, and if protecting it meant losing everything else, then so be it. Monday morning's board vote would determine his fate. But for the first time in his career, Jonathan Pierce wasn't afraid of losing his empire, he was only afraid of losing them. The board vote happened on a gray Monday morning in November. Jonathan sat at the head of the conference table, surrounded by 12 faces that had once looked at him with respect. Now, they looked at him with suspicion, calculation, and in Marcus Chen's case, barely concealed triumph. Let's be clear about what's happening here, Marcus said, his voice smooth and practiced. Our CEO has become a liability, missing critical meetings, making headlines for all the wrong reasons, using a disadvantaged child as some kind of... Careful, Marcus. Jonathan's voice was ice. Finish that sentence and I'll finish you. Marcus smiled. Threatening me in front of the board? That's exactly the instability we're talking about. The vote was swift. 7-5. Jonathan Pierce was out as CEO of Apex Innovations, effective immediately. He walked out of the building he built without looking back. The media frenzy that followed was vicious. Business journals called him distracted. Competitors called him soft. Social media split between those who saw him as exploitative and those who thought he was naive. Either way, his reputation was shredded. But Jonathan found he didn't care. He cared about one thing: keeping his promise to Zara. For 2 weeks, he stayed away from the Southside apartment. He monitored from a distance, making sure the news crews dispersed, that Diane and Zara could return to their normal life. The wheelchair was delivered as promised. A top-of-the-line pediatric model with adjustable everything, built to grow with Zara. His lawyer called daily with settlement offers, non-compete agreements, severance packages. Jonathan ignored them all. His assistant cleaned out his office and shipped his belongings. He didn't open the boxes. Instead, he sat in his penthouse, 30 floors above Chicago, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows, and felt more alone than he ever had. On Thanksgiving morning, his phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, Mr. Jonathan?" Zara's voice was small, tentative. "It's me, Zara." His chest tightened. "Zara, how did you?" "Mrs. Patterson helped me find your number. Are you okay? Mama said you lost your job because of us." "Not because of you," Jonathan said firmly. "Never because of you. But the TV said." "The TV doesn't know anything, Zara. I made my choice and I'd make it again." Silence on the other end. Then, "We're having Thanksgiving dinner. Just me and Mama and Mrs. Patterson. Mama said I shouldn't bother you, but I miss you, and it doesn't feel right without you here." Jonathan closed his eyes, emotion swelling in his throat. "I miss you too. Then come, please." Mama made sweet potato pie. She said it's probably not as fancy as what you're used to, but tell your mama I'll be there in 30 minutes. "Really?" The joy in her voice nearly broke him. "Really, really? Really, really?" When he arrived at the apartment, Diane opened the door with a mixture of resignation and something else. Maybe relief. "I told her not to call you." "I'm glad she did." Jonathan held up a bag. "I brought wine for you and sparkling cider for Zara. And cranberry sauce, because I didn't know if you liked the canned kind or homemade." Diane's lips twitched. "We like both." Inside, the small apartment was warm, filled with the smell of roasting turkey. Mrs. Patterson sat on the couch, her eyebrow raised in that knowing way. "Mr. Pierce, thought you'd be at some fancy restaurant. Turns out I'm not welcome at many fancy places anymore," Jonathan said wryly. "Good," Mrs. Patterson replied. "Means you're finally learning what matters." Zara wheeled over in her new chair, spinning in circles to show it off. "Look, it goes so smoothly, and the wheels don't wobble, and I can reach everything myself." "I see that." Jonathan's smile was genuine. "It suits you." Dinner was nothing like the Thanksgiving spreads Jonathan had attended over the years. No catering, no crystal, no pretense. Just a simple meal around a table with mismatched chairs. But when Diane said grace, thanking God for friends who showed up when it mattered, Jonathan felt something shift deep in his chest. This was family, not by blood but by choice. After dinner, while Diane and Mrs. Patterson cleaned up, Jonathan helped Zara with a puzzle on the living room floor. She worked quietly for a while before asking, "Do you regret it?" "Regret what?" "Helping me. Losing your job. Everything." Jonathan set down a puzzle piece and looked at her directly. "Zara, I spent 15 years building a company. And in all that time, I never once felt as useful as I did the day I fixed your wheelchair in the rain. But you lost everything." "No." His voice was soft but certain. "I lost a job. There's a difference." Zara studied him with those two wise eyes. "Mama says you're the bravest person she knows. She said it takes courage to choose people over power." Jonathan's throat tightened. "Your mama's pretty brave herself." As evening fell, Mrs. Patterson left, and Zara grew sleepy. Diane carried her to bed while Jonathan stood at the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline in the distance. His penthouse was up there somewhere, empty and cold. Diane returned, 2 cups of coffee in hand. She offered him one. Thank you for coming. It meant everything to her. It meant everything to me too. They stood in comfortable silence until Diane spoke again. I read about the board vote. I'm sorry. Don't be. They did me a favor. How can you say that? You lost your company. Jonathan turned to face her. I lost a company I didn't recognize anymore. Somewhere between the first million and the first billion, I forgot why I started. I thought success meant never needing anyone. He paused. Zara reminded me that needing people isn't a weakness. It's being human. Diane's eyes glistened. You could have walked away, saved your career. Why didn't you? Because walking away from you and Zara would have been the biggest failure of my life. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Diane looked away, blinking rapidly. You barely know us. I know enough. Jonathan set down his coffee. I know Zara counts to 10 before she answers math problems because she's making sure she gets it right. I know you fold laundry at midnight because it's the only quiet time you get. I know Mrs. Patterson brings you groceries every Tuesday and pretends she's just passing by. I know this apartment has more love in it than any mansion I've ever seen. Jonathan, I know I'm falling in love with this life, he continued, his voice raw. With Saturday morning pancakes and homework help and feeling like I matter for reasons that have nothing to do with money. And I know that terrifies you because I'm the guy who brings chaos. But I'm also the guy who's not going anywhere. Diane's breath caught. For a long moment she didn't speak. Then, you're right. It does terrify me. Because Zara's already attached. And if you leave, I won't. You don't know that. Life happens. You'll rebuild your career. You'll move on. And we'll be right here, Jonathan interrupted. Where I want to be. Diane searched his face, looking for cracks in his certainty. You lost everything for us. No, Jonathan said quietly. I lost everything before I met you. You're helping me find it again. Later, as he prepared to leave, Zara called sleepily from her room. Mr. Jonathan? He stepped into her doorway. Yeah. Next week is my birthday. Will you come? Jonathan smiled, his heart full. I wouldn't miss it for the world. As he drove home through the cold November night, his phone buzzed with another call from his lawyer. Another settlement offer. Another attempt to salvage what was left of his empire. He declined it. Because for the first time in his life, Jonathan Pierce understood what it meant to be rich. And it had nothing to do with money. Zara's 9th birthday party was supposed to be small. Just a few kids from school, cake from the grocery store, and decorations from the dollar store. Jonathan had spent the morning helping Diane hang streamers in the community center they'd rented for $20 an hour. He was tying balloons to chairs when the first pain hit. It started in his chest, a tightness that made breathing difficult. Jonathan gripped the back of a chair, willing it to pass. Stress, he told himself. Just stress from the past few weeks. But then his left arm went numb. Jonathan. Diane's voice seemed far away. Are you okay? He tried to answer, but the room tilted. The last thing he saw before his knees buckled was Zara's face. Her mouth open in a scream he couldn't hear. Then everything went black. He woke to the sterile smell of a hospital and the steady beep of monitors. His chest ached. His head pounded. And when he tried to sit up, a firm hand pressed him back down. Don't move. Diane's voice was sharp with worry. She sat beside his bed, still wearing the party dress she'd put on for Zara's celebration. Her eyes were red, her makeup smudged. What happened? Jonathan's voice was a rasp. Heart attack. The doctors said it was stress-induced, combined with undiagnosed hypertension and... Her voice broke. Jonathan, you almost died. Right there in front of Zara. At her birthday party. The words hit him like a physical blow. Is she? She's terrified. Mrs. Patterson took her home, but she won't stop crying. She thinks you're going to die because of her. Because you lost your job helping her. Because the stress of everything. No. Jonathan tried to sit up again, and this time Diane didn't stop him, though her hand hovered protectively. This isn't her fault. I know that. You know that. But she's 9 years old, and she watched you collapse. Diane's hands trembled as she wiped her eyes. The paramedics said if we'd been anywhere else, if we hadn't been at the community center next to the fire station, you wouldn't have made it. Jonathan closed his eyes, the weight of that reality settling over him. How long was I out? 6 hours. They had to do an emergency procedure to place a stent. Your heart? She stopped, unable to continue. A doctor entered then. A tall woman with silver-streaked hair and a no-nonsense expression. Mr. Pierce, I'm Dr. Okafor. You're very lucky to be alive. So I've heard. Dr. Okafor pulled up his chart on a tablet. Your labs show chronic stress markers off the charts. High blood pressure that's likely been untreated for years. You've been running yourself into the ground, and your body finally said enough. She fixed him with a stern look. You need complete rest. No stress. No work. And you need to make serious lifestyle changes, or the next heart attack will kill you. After she left, Jonathan stared at the ceiling. I need to see Zara. You need to rest, Diane said firmly. Diane, please. She thinks this is her fault. I can't let her believe that. Diane's expression wavered between anger and understanding. Finally, she nodded. I'll bring her tomorrow. But Jonathan, we need to talk about this. About what? About what happens now. Her voice was steady, but her eyes glistened. You almost died because your life fell apart. Because you chose us over your career. Because the stress of losing everything. Stop, Jonathan interrupted. Just stop. Yes, I had a heart attack. Yes, my life changed. But choosing you and Zara wasn't what broke me. Living without purpose for 15 years, that's what broke me. You didn't destroy me. You saved me from destroying myself. That's not how Zara sees it. Then help me show her the truth. Diane looked away, tears sliding down her cheeks. What if next time you don't wake up? What if she loses you? She's already lost her father, and now. I'm not going anywhere, Jonathan said fiercely. You can't promise that. None of us can. The words hung heavy between them, because she was right. Life offered no guarantees. But Jonathan had learned something in that moment of darkness before he collapsed. He'd rather die having mattered to someone than live another day in isolation. The next day, Diane brought Zara to the hospital. The little girl wheeled herself in slowly, her eyes puffy from crying, clutching her stuffed elephant like a lifeline. Hey, birthday girl, Jonathan said softly. Zara didn't smile. She stopped at the foot of his bed, her voice small. Are you going to die? Not today. But you got sick because of me. Because you helped me and lost your job and now. Zara, look at me. Jonathan waited until her tear-filled eyes met his. I got sick because I spent 15 years forgetting to take care of myself. I worked too hard, stressed too much, and ignored every warning sign. That's not your fault. That's mine. But if you hadn't helped me, if I hadn't helped you, I'd still be broken, just in a different way. He held out his hand, and after a hesitation, she wheeled closer and took it. You know what the doctor told me? She said if I'd collapsed anywhere else, in my office, in my car, alone in my apartment, I'd be dead. But I was with you, at your party, near the fire station. You saved my life, Zara. I didn't do anything, she whispered. You did everything. You reminded me what matters. You gave me a reason to show up. And when I fell, you made sure I wasn't alone. His voice thickened. That's not nothing. That's everything. Zara climbed awkwardly from her wheelchair onto the hospital bed, carefully avoiding his 4 lines, and buried her face in his shoulder. Her small body shook with sobs. I don't want you to leave. I'm not leaving, Jonathan promised, wrapping his arm around her. But I need to be smarter, take better care of myself, so I can keep coming to Pancake Saturdays and homework help and whatever else you need. Diane stood in the doorway, watching them, tears streaming freely now. Over Zara's head, Jonathan met her eyes. In that moment, something passed between them, an understanding that whatever came next, they would face it together. 3 days later, Jonathan was released from the hospital with a list of medications, strict orders to rest, and a follow-up appointment schedule that would keep him busy for months. Marcus Chun called while Jonathan was signing discharge papers. Heard you had a little health scare. Shame about that. What do you want, Marcus? Just checking in. Making sure you're okay. A pause. Though I have to say, collapsing at a child's birthday party? That's a new low, even for you. Jonathan's grip tightened on the phone. Goodbye, Marcus. Wait, there's something you should know. The board is voting next week on whether to sell Apex to TechCore. I'll be taking a very generous exit package. Just thought you'd want to know your life's work is about to be dismantled for parts. The line went dead. Jonathan stared at the phone, feeling the familiar surge of anger, the instinct to fight, to protect what he'd built. His heart rate spiked. The monitor beside him beeped faster. Diane noticed immediately. What's wrong? He told her about the call, about the impending sale, about everything he'd created being torn apart. What are you going to do? She asked quietly. Jonathan looked at her, then at Zara coloring in the corner, then at the heart monitor that had nearly flatlined 3 days ago. Nothing, he said finally. I'm going to do nothing. Diane's eyes widened. But they can have it. The company, the contracts, the glory. I'm done fighting for things that don't fight back. He stood slowly, steadying himself. I'm going to fight for something that matters now. As they left the hospital, Zara between them, Jonathan felt something he hadn't felt since that rainy day in October. Peace. But neither he nor Diane could have predicted what would happen next, or that Zara's quick thinking in the days to come would be the only thing standing between Jonathan and complete destruction. The real crisis was just beginning. 2 weeks after Jonathan's heart attack, Zara noticed something her mother and Jonathan had missed. She was doing homework at the kitchen table when Jonathan's phone buzzed with yet another call from his lawyer. He declined it, as he had every call for days, but Zara saw the frustration flash across his face. Why don't you answer? She asked. Because it doesn't matter anymore, Zara. The company's gone. I need to focus on getting better. But Zara had been listening. She'd heard the adults talking in hushed voices about the sale, about Marcus Chen's betrayal, about how TechCore was planning to gut Apex and fire hundreds of employees. People with families, people who needed their jobs. That night, after Diane tucked her in, Zara did something she'd never done before. She called Mrs. Patterson. I need your help, Zara whispered into the phone. Mr. Jonathan's in trouble, and I think I know how to fix it. 3 days later, Jonathan sat in Diane's living room when his lawyer called again. This time, the man's voice was frantic. Jonathan, you need to see this. Now. Within minutes, Jonathan's laptop was open to a news article that made his heart pound. Not from stress this time, but from shock. The headline read, 9-year-old takes on corporate giant. Zara Williams' letter goes viral. Zara had written to the Apex employees. With Mrs. Patterson's help, she'd crafted a simple, honest letter explaining how Jonathan had helped her when no one else would, how he'd lost his job because he chose kindness over profit, and how the same man being pushed out of his own company was the only person who'd ever stopped in the rain to fix a stranger's wheelchair. She'd sent it to 50 Apex employees. They'd forwarded it to 500. By morning, 5,000 people had shared it. By evening, it had reached 50,000. The story had exploded across social media. News outlets picked it up. Employees began organizing. Within 48 hours, a petition demanding an emergency shareholder meeting had gathered over 100,000 signatures. Jonathan stared at the screen, his eyes burning. She did this. Diane stood behind him, her hand on his shoulder. She did this. Zara wheeled into the room, looking nervous. Are you mad? Jonathan turned to her, dropping to his knees so they were eye level. Mad? Zara, you just... His voice broke. You saved me. Well, you saved me first, she said simply. That's what family does. The emergency shareholder meeting was held on a cold December morning. Jonathan walked into the Apex building for the first time in 2 months. His heart steady, his purpose clear. The room was packed. Employees lined the walls. Shareholders filled every seat. And in the front row, Diane sat beside Zara in her wheelchair, both of them wearing their Sunday best. Marcus Chun sat at the board table, his expression smug until he saw the crowd. Then his confidence faltered. Jonathan didn't need to say much. The employees spoke for him. One by one, they stood and shared stories of Jonathan's leadership, his integrity, his vision. They spoke of the company culture he'd built, the opportunities he'd created, the lives he'd changed. And when Zara wheeled forward to the microphone, the room fell silent. "Mr. Jonathan stopped for me when everyone else walked by," she said, her voice small but steady. "He didn't have to. Nobody made him. He just did it because it was right. And then he lost everything because people said he shouldn't care about a girl like me." She looked directly at Marcus Chun. "But caring about people isn't a weakness. It's what makes someone strong." The vote was unanimous. Jonathan was reinstated as CEO. Marcus Chun was removed from the board entirely, and TechCore's acquisition offer was rejected. 6 months later, Jonathan stood in the newly renovated Apex Community Center, a facility built with company funds to provide resources for underserved neighborhoods. Wheelchair ramps led to every entrance. Adaptive technology filled every classroom. Zara cut the ribbon at the opening ceremony, her smile bright enough to light the whole room. That evening, back at Diane's apartment, they celebrated with pizza and soda. Jonathan had sold his penthouse and moved to a modest condo just 3 blocks away. Close enough to be there for Saturday pancakes. Close enough to help with homework. Close enough to be family. "You know what's funny?" Jonathan said, watching Zara show Diane a drawing she'd made of the 3 of them. "I spent 15 years building an empire, and I was miserable. Now I've got less money, a smaller title, and a doctor who monitors my every move." He smiled. "And I've never been happier." Diane leaned against him, her voice soft. "That's because you finally figured out what success actually means." "What's that?" "Being exactly where you're supposed to be." Jonathan looked around the small apartment, at the drawings on the walls, at Zara giggling over her pizza, at Diane's gentle smile, and realized she was right. He was home.